How's it going? Today I have another exciting thriller. Grab a bite. Sit back and enjoy. Inside a walk-in pantry. Suddenly, she hears heavy footsteps from the floor above, followed by screams. Frightened, Betriek covers her ears until she notices blood dripping from the ceiling. The blood pours down the walls, so Betriek hides under a shelf and covers her ears again. 30 years later, an adult Betriek works on her laptop after sleeping with a co-worker named Edwin. As she's getting ready to pick up her daughter from school, Betriek calls her mother, Elsk, and learns that she's already driving her daughter, Hannah, home. Betriek complains as she believes it's risky for her mother to drive, but Elsk assures her they're fine. Soon, Betriek arrives home, and Hannah happily greets her. As she's taking dinner to her father, Roel, Betriek sees that her father is talking to the police chief, Hans. After the officers leave, Roel tells his daughter that they were asking if they'd seen the bogman, Mika, who's been digging holes nearby. That evening, Mika continues digging a hole but stops when he hears a whisper. Afraid, he turns around and sees a figure approaching him. By morning, the police find him dead. A research team gathers not far from the scene, led by Jonas. When he asks about the crime scene, his assistant, Sonia, explains that the police found the man dead, possibly due to a heart attack. Sonia then takes him to a tent they've set up to observe a mummified corpse they found buried in the soil. That evening, Betriek wakes up to find her mother seizing in her bed. After calming her down, Betriek sees Hannah up. As she takes her daughter back to bed, Betriek sees their window open, so she closes it, only to spot a man standing outside their house. She puts Hannah to bed and checks again, but the man is gone. The following day, Betriek finds Roel arguing with the research team but can't understand them as they don't speak Dutch. When Jonas checks in on them, she helps translate her father's complaint in English, noting that they saw someone outside their backyard in the middle of the night. They assume the man is part of their team, so Roel threatens the research team from stepping into their property again. Later, Betriek takes her mother to the doctor, who thinks that Elsk's condition might be due to unprocessed trauma, so she suggests undergoing therapy. Elsk isn't happy about this, but Betriek is open to it. When they arrive home, they find Roel showing Hannah the cameras he set up outside the house, which would take photos if it detects movements like a trespasser. At night, Betriek is recording herself playing the violin when Elsk knocks on her door to assure her that she's fine. She knows that her mother just doesn't like the idea of therapy, but Betriek says okay nonetheless. Wanting to relax, Betriek goes to the pub where she meets Jonas for drinks. She rants about her mother's habits, including collecting sugar packets from restaurants and serving them to guests. During this, she notices her other co-workers drinking at another table, including Edwin, who awkwardly just nods to her. On the way home, Betriek recounts how she and her late husband, Neil, used to be in a band, and they brought Hannah along during tours. However, Neil suddenly died of a heart attack, so she ended up back in town. She shares that people in the neighborhood think their family is cursed. Besides her husband dying, her grandmother was also killed when she was young, and the killer was never found. After her death, Roel started drinking while Elsk started having her mysterious illness that the doctors still can't figure out. One day, Betriek helps students prepare for the town's annual celebration while Edwin directs the stage play. After the practice, Edwin invites her to his apartment again, but she decides to end their relationship. As Betriek puts Hannah to bed that evening, the girl asks for bedtime stories. She adds that she wants her mother to keep reading her to sleep forever, even when she's older. Betriek smiles at the thought. Afterward, Betriek finds Roel outside, watching their backyard for intruders. She advises him to go back inside as it's freezing, but he insists. Betriek returns to the house and, to her surprise, finds the same man from before in their kitchen. Radu apologizes to her as he drank some of their milk. Seeing a knife next to him, Betriek slowly backs away then goes to Elsk. However, Radu approaches them, crying. The two slowly go up their stairs as the man keeps apologizing, saying that someone is making him do this. He suddenly grabs Elsk and pulls her down. He then wields his knife, but Betriek slams his hand against the railings to make him let go. Before the women can crawl back up, Radu screams, making them freeze in horror. The sound wakes Hannah, so Betriek quickly carries her daughter away while Elsk takes the knife and threatens the man with it. Radu, however, forces her hands to direct the knife onto herself. Forcing her mouth open, the man pushes the knife inside until Roel hits him over the head. The police soon take Radu away while the family recuperates. The next day, Jonas visits them, and Elsk serves him a bowl of sugar packets from different restaurants, like what Betriek said. He admits that Radu was part of his team, though he'd known him to be non-violent. Remembering her grandmother's death, Betriek asks Jonas how old Radu is, confirming that he'd been a teenager the day she was killed. Seeing her daughter still frightened about it, Betriek asks Jonas to talk privately. In her room, she breaks down, so Jonas comforts her. Hearing their daughter's cries, Rolf says she is back, so they should leave, but Elsk claims he's going crazy again. As she's cleaning up, Elsk suddenly collapses, so she's taken to the hospital, where she gets an MRI scan. During the scan, however, Elsk presses the panic button, so they take her out immediately. Elsk refuses more procedures, and Betriek agrees since she keeps pressing the panic button before they can get a proper scan. While getting into their car, Betriek notices one of Jonas' team members, Leonard, heading to the hospital. Curious, Betriek follows him and finds him and Jonas visiting Radu, who's in intensive care. She sees Radu's son hugging his unconscious body, but the child suddenly turns to Betriek as if sensing her presence there. Terrified, Betriek leaves, but the boy follows her into the elevator. There, the boy suddenly repeats a foreign phrase and holds out his hand. Betriek touches his hand, and the elevator suddenly loses power. While the emergency lights flicker, the boy starts muttering something that echoes. With a gasp, he snaps out of it and looks behind Betriek. When the woman looks at the reflection in front of her, she sees something wispy behind her. Slowly, Betriek moves to the side to get a better look and realizes that the wisps are hair strands of a gaunt ghost behind her. Betriek turns in shock, only for the ghost to disappear and the lights to return. The elevator finally opens, and the boy cries in the corner. Confused, Betriek simply leaves and returns to her car. Quickly, Betriek checks a translation app on her phone, discovering that what the boy said means she never died. Before she could process this, Betriek sees Jonas and Leonard heading to their car, so she goes up to them. She asks if they've discovered why Radu attacked them, but Jonas answers that Radu hasn't woken up yet. However, at their camp, the others shared that Radu was digging alone, away from the site. The next day, Betriek meets with Jonas at the bar, as she requested. From there, she points him to Mitch's father, Tun, explaining that his son died after digging something up. She then urges Jonas to tell her what they're researching at the bog, so he shares that they found a woman's mummified body. Hearing this, she moves to speak to Tun, who recounts that his son somehow knew where to dig in the bog, as Mika was the one who first discovered the mummified body. Tun shares that men in his family are always sensitive to supernatural things, but Mika was special. Betriek asks if something told him where to dig, so Tun mentions the mythical Helen's Whispers, which talks about the legend of Feek. As they're driving back, Jonas asks who Helen is, so Betriek shares that she's a story to scare kids from playing in the bog. She hates the story since her father claimed to have heard Helen's whispers near their home. Jonas finds it ridiculous, so she changes the topic and asks about the mummified woman. He refuses to say more to avoid getting her paranoid, but Betriek points out that Radu attacked her family, so he shouldn't treat her like she's crazy. Jonas defends that her trauma might alter her perception, but Betriek is offended and abruptly leaves his car. Worried, Jonas follows her, but a drunk Betriek runs away. She laughs as he chases her, but when he catches up, Betriek kisses him, and they get intimate on the field. At night, Jonas returns to their camp, and Sonia shows him how the mummified woman's throat was cut vertically. To his surprise, they also found 4 others from the holes that Radu dug up. Sonia notices that Leonard isn't feeling well, so she advises him to rest. Before they leave, Jonas asks Sonia to look up something. Meanwhile, Rolf's motion-triggered camera catches something in the dark. In the morning, Rolf shows the photos to Hans, insisting that the device wouldn't have taken the photos if there was nothing. However, Hans only sees gray smudges and thinks that Rolf has become paranoid after the attack. Rolf is convinced that Radu was only listening to someone's commands, but Hans points out that he was rambling just like this after his mother died. The day of the annual celebration arrives, and Betriek is busy preparing for the kids' performance. Meanwhile, Sonia finally finds the legend of Feek, which is about an evil lord, Walter, and his wife, Helen. The couple lived in wealth while their people struggled with poverty. They had a servant named Feek, whom Walter got pregnant, angering his wife. As Sonia reads the legend, the school performance retells the same story. Helen believed that her husband was under Feek's spell, thus, the girl was accused of witchcraft and thrown into a dungeon. Feek prayed for help, and the one who listened to her was Moloch, the god of child sacrifice. Moloch promised to help her but warned that her vengeance would also be her prison. Moloch also demanded her unborn child as payment, and Feek accepted, thus, she was given Moloch's mark on her forehead. As Betriek watches the children's performance where Hannah portrays Feek, she finds Hannah's old drawing on the floor, which looks like the ghost from the hospital. Sonia continues that on Feek's trial, she freed herself and cut her throat vertically. This caused Helen's soul to be taken while Feek possessed her body, becoming the Lord's wife. During her reign, the town became more prosperous, therefore, the town continues celebrating Feek as a beacon of light. People believe that Helen's spirit still roams the bog since then, seeking vengeance. Given how the mummified women also had their throats slit the same way, Jonas starts to wonder about these stories. After the performance, Betriek finds her daughter and asks her about the drawing. Hannah claims that she made it up, but Betriek remains nervous. While driving home, they find Roel working on something in the forest, having missed his granddaughter's performance. Still, Roel continues setting up a wire with a bell attached to it. After dropping off Hannah at home, Betriek visits Tun to ask for help, believing that her daughter is also getting affected by the strange events. Tun thinks that, like his family, Betriek and Hannah are also sensitive to vibrations around them. He tells her it's better to ignore what they sense, but sometimes, these vibrations are warnings. Tun teaches her how to focus on the vibrations to translate them better. As she listens to him tapping, Betriek falls into a trance and finds herself back at the night of her grandmother's death. As she's looking at a family photo, young Betriek sees the reflection of her grandmother's body with her throat slit vertically. Betriek snaps out of the trance and sees Tun troubled. Looking behind her, Betriek sees that his fishes have suddenly died. Later that evening, Sonia finds Betriek looking into their files at their camp. Hearing that Jonas isn't there, she asks Sonia about the mummified bodies they found, who are all women from different eras. Sonia confirms that this is true, and Betriek assumes that the women were all related. Meanwhile, Leonard roams in the woods, triggering the bell that Roel placed. The older man tasers him before he can approach their house and ties his hands, but Roel hears whispers behind him. Soon, Betriek returns home and tells her mother to start packing so they can leave. She tells her about the bodies found in the bog that were killed the same way Feek killed herself. She insists that someone sacrificed those women, like how they killed her grandmother. Outside, Roel searches the woods, hearing the bells around him. As he checks the darkness, figures in white approach him. Roel shines the light on one of the women and cries upon seeing Elsk among them. The women start whispering, and suddenly, the weeping Roel turns stoic. At the town parade, Sonia tells Jonas how Betriek went to their camp. She shares that Betriek said her family is in danger, making them wonder if someone is still sacrificing for Moloch. Just then, a group of masked people carries an effigy of Feek through the parade. Worried, Jonas leaves. Later, Betriek and Elsk find her father standing at their door with wide eyes. Afraid, Betriek shields Hannah as Roel breaks the glass door to unlock it. Quickly, she removes the keys to prevent him from unlocking it, but they remember that the back door is open. While Elsk checks the back door, Betriek hides Hannah in the walk-in pantry. Suddenly, Roel crashes through the front door and grabs his wife. As he's about to stab her, Betriek stops him but gets knocked down. Losing his knife, Roel chokes Elsk instead. He screams, and the women in white around their house scream with him. Finally, Betriek knocks her father out with a fire poker. When she checks, however, Elsk is gone. Betriek looks for her mother, but soon, Roel wakes up to Betriek's gasp. He gets up and heads upstairs to see his daughter unconscious. Suddenly, Elsk appears and puts a noose around his neck. Struggling through the rope, Roel sees his wife with white eyes just before he slips off the stairs. Meanwhile, Jonas navigates through the woods towards Betriek's house when his foot gets caught in a bear trap. Soon, people with masks enter the house while Hannah hides. Betriek wakes up, bound and gagged on the bed. To her surprise, her mother is at the foot of the bed, surrounded by masked people. Elsk assures her not to worry as she picks up a razor and slits her own throat. Betriek's cries are muffled as she watches her mother bleed out on the floor. Suddenly, the candles around them are snuffed out. A hand grabs the bed, and Feek emerges with her marked forehead. As Feek approaches Betriek, the woman starts seizing. Eventually, Jonas arrives at the house, limping. He finds Roel's body over the stairs before reaching the bedroom. Passing Elsk's body, he wakes Betriek and frees her from her bindings. Afterward, they get Hannah from the walk-in pantry. Weeks later, Betriek and Hannah meet Jonas, who offers them to move into his new property's guesthouse so they can escape their tragic home. However, Betriek insists on having a stable environment for Hannah, even sharing that she sold her violin in favor of a more stable career. She assures him that they're getting through well, but Jonas believes that she should seek professional help. Despite his worries, Betriek shrugs them off and repeats that they're fine. She then gets up to leave and advises him that it's sometimes best to leave things be. Before leaving, Betriek pockets a sugar packet from their table. Noticing this, Jonas realizes something is wrong but only watches the mother and daughter leave. That evening, Betriek has Hannah reading a bedtime story instead. During this, the ghost of the real Betriek watches them along with the other spirits who fell victim to the curse. However, she can't do anything but watch her daughter with Feek, who's raising Hannah to be her new vessel in the future. Hope you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing, it is free. Cancel anytime.